The Galactic Council's war chamber erupted in laughter when Admiral Zexathara pulled up the human tactical footage on the main display. The recording showed a small human squad moving through dense jungle terrain, their movements seemingly random and chaotic compared to the precise formations favored by every other species in the galaxy. "Look at them," wheezed Commander Grix, his 4 eyes watering with mirth. "They crawl through mud like primitive animals. No formation integrity, no synchronized advance patterns. How did these creatures ever leave their homeworld?" Fleet Admiral Vorth nodded his massive head, mandibles clicking in amusement. "The Terrans have been at war for barely 3 cycles since joining the Confederation. Every other member species required at least 50 cycles to develop proper military doctrine. Yet somehow they think they can contribute to our campaign against the hegemony." The assembled military leaders of 17 different species shared in the derision. The humans had arrived in the galactic community like excited children, eager to help in the ongoing conflict against the totalitarian Xerion hegemony. Their offer of ground forces had been accepted more out of politeness than genuine military need. "Their equipment is adequate, I'll grant them that," Admiral Zexathara conceded, manipulating the holographic display to show human weapons specifications. "But their tactics, it's as if they've learned nothing from our military academies. They refuse to adopt standard battle doctrine. Instead, they insist on these guerrilla methods." General Kef, representative of the warrior caste of Drakmor, struck the table with his armored fist. "Guerrilla tactics are the domain of insurgents and terrorists. Honorable warfare requires direct engagement, superior firepower, and technological supremacy. The humans seem to think warfare is some sort of elaborate game of hide-and-seek. What the Galactic Council didn't understand was that while they had spent millennia perfecting their military doctrines in relatively peaceful space, humanity had never known true peace. Earth had been a crucible of constant conflict, where adaptability meant survival and rigid doctrine meant extinction. 3 standard weeks later, the mockery turned to confusion. "Sir, we've lost contact with the 47th Xerion Battalion," reported Lieutenant Yix to Hegemony Command. Last transmission placed them at grid reference Tango 77. Supreme Commander Nexus turned from his tactical display, his cybernetic implants glowing red in the dim command center. "Define lost contact. They're simply gone, sir. No distress signals, no battle reports, no energy signatures. The entire battalion, 2,000 soldiers and their equipment vanished sometime during the night cycle." This was impossible. Xerion military doctrine was flawless, developed over centuries of conquest. Their soldiers were disciplined, their equipment was superior, and their formations were unbreakable. A battalion didn't simply disappear. What forces were in that sector? Nexus demanded. Lieutenant Yix consulted his datapad, his tentacles trembling slightly. According to intelligence reports, only a small human detachment. Perhaps 50 soldiers. The Supreme Commander's laugh was cold and mechanical. 50 primitives eliminated 2,000 of our finest? Run a full diagnostic on your sensors, Lieutenant. They're clearly malfunctioning. But the sensors weren't malfunctioning. Over the following weeks, entire Xerion armies began to vanish. Not destroyed, vanished. Reconnaissance drones would locate massive enemy encampments one day, only to find empty clearings the next morning. Supply convoys disappeared between checkpoints. Command posts went dark without warning. The humans, meanwhile, seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Xerion patrols would report brief firefights with small human units, only to arrive at the coordinates and find nothing but disturbed earth and the lingering smell of explosives. Motion sensors would detect massive troop movements, but visual confirmation showed only empty forest. Supreme Commander Nexus found himself studying human military history in desperation, trying to understand what was happening to his forces. What he discovered chilled his enhanced neural pathways. Humans didn't just study war, they had perfected it through necessity. While other species had developed military doctrine through theoretical exercises and limited conflicts, humanity had spent tens of thousands of years locked in an endless cycle of warfare. They had faced extinction countless times and had learned that survival often meant abandoning conventional wisdom. The humans called it asymmetric warfare, and they had been practicing it since before they discovered fire. They understood that a smaller, more mobile force could defeat a larger conventional army not through superior firepower, but through superior adaptation. They struck where the enemy was weak, disappeared when the enemy was strong, and turned the environment itself into a weapon. Major Sarah Chen crouched in the undergrowth, watching through her enhanced scope as another Xerian patrol passed below. Her team of 12 had been responsible for the elimination of over 3,000 enemy soldiers in the past month, and the Xerians still had no idea how they were doing it. "The thing about superior firepower," she whispered into her comm, "is that it's useless if you can't find your target." Her soldiers moved like ghosts through the alien landscape. They used the terrain, the weather, even the local wildlife to mask their movements. They struck fast and hard, then melted away before the enemy could respond. They booby-trapped supply routes, sabotaged equipment, and turned the Xerians' own rigid doctrine against them. But the real genius wasn't in their tactics. It was in their psychology. Humans understood fear in a way that other species didn't. They knew that an enemy who couldn't see his opponent, who couldn't predict where the next attack would come from, would eventually break under the psychological pressure. Within 2 months, Xerion forces began retreating from the contested worlds. Their soldiers refused to leave their fortified positions, paralyzed by the knowledge that humans could be anywhere, watching, waiting. Supply lines collapsed as convoys refused to risk the journey between bases. Supreme Commander Nexus's final report to the Hegemony High Command was brief. Recommend immediate withdrawal from all sectors containing human forces. Their tactical doctrine is incomprehensible. We cannot fight an enemy we cannot find, and we cannot predict an enemy that refuses to follow logical military principles. Back in the Galactic Council chambers, the laughter had died. Fleet Admiral Vorth stared at the tactical reports in disbelief. 17 Xerian armies, nearly 500,000 soldiers, had simply ceased to exist over the course of 3 months. Not destroyed, not captured. Gone. Admiral Zexthera cleared her throat nervously. Perhaps we should reconsider our assessment of human military capabilities. General Kef's warrior pride had taken a severe blow. How do you fight an enemy that won't stand and face you honorably? The answer came from Colonel Martinez, the human military liaison, who had been quietly observing from the back of the chamber. You don't fight that enemy, General. You become that enemy. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species in the galaxy had developed their military doctrine based on the assumption that warfare was a contest between comparable forces using similar tactics. Humans had learned warfare in a crucible where adaptation wasn't just an advantage. It was the difference between civilization and extinction. The galaxy had mocked human tactics because they seemed primitive, chaotic, and undisciplined. What they failed to understand was that chaos in the right hands was the most disciplined force of all. Within a year, every major military academy in the galaxy had human instructors teaching courses in unconventional warfare. The age of rigid battle doctrine was ending, replaced by a new understanding that true military superiority came not from following rules, but from rewriting them entirely. The humans had arrived in the galaxy as eager students, ready to learn from their more experienced neighbors. Instead, they had become the teachers, showing the galaxy that sometimes the most primitive approach was actually the most advanced. And in the quiet moments between battles, when other species wondered how humans had become so proficient at warfare, the answer was simple. They had never had the luxury of fighting fair.